This tutorial is designed to instruct you on how to complete Assignment 3, which is a position paper. When doing this paper, you're going to notice that you're going to be presented with a topic that might pertain to Canada or even more specifically Alberta. As you see in the example on the right, you have a topic such as, should voting in Canadian federal elections be made mandatory? And then you're given 3 different citizens, and they're going to vary in their opinions. This is going to help you explore the issue. So ultimately, this written response is designed for you to choose a position based on the assigned question and then defend it. And you have to be convincing. Your goal is to show that you understand a wide range of perspectives on this issue. You can do this by addressing the points made in all 3 sources and discussing all the pros and cons of this issue. Then you're going to defend your position using evidence. It is not enough to say how you feel about the topic. You must use facts and examples. You can provide examples discussed in class to prove why your position is the correct one. Now, before writing, we need to prepare our arguments. It's important to note that this may be a topic you've never considered before or have ever discussed in class, and that's okay. What you need to do is look at all the things you do know about Canada, and that will help you make an informed opinion. The first thing you should do is highlight all the ideas that you agree with in one color and highlight all the ideas you disagree with in another color. This will give you a visual as to the points you agree with and the points you disagree with, and you may notice that you agree more with one source than another. Next, you're going to identify the ideology of each citizen. Usually one is more individualist, one is more collectivist, and one is more moderate. But you may have 2 that are more left-leaning or more right-leaning, and that's perfectly fine. So as you're reading through the sources and you're highlighting all of the information you agree and disagree with, decide, does this sound more like a right-wing individualist, a left-wing collectivist, or somewhere in the middle? For example, Citizen 3 in this example is a bit of both. He's a collectivist in that he wants to do what's best for society, but he's also an individualist because he wants people to have their own individual choice to vote. So now we're going to start with the introduction, and this is going to be your first paragraph. In your first paragraph, you're going to really explore the issue. You want to provide background on the issue. Where does Canada currently stand on this issue? Why is this a controversial issue, especially in Canada? And are there any examples, evidence, or events that you could include to add to this discussion? How does this issue address balancing individual rights and freedoms versus government control? Does this issue have the potential to violate our individual rights and freedoms for the greater good? You'll continue in this introduction by describing each opposing perspective. So you'll talk about people on one side. Some believe, and then you'll fill in the blank, and then you'll explain why they would believe that. Then you'll talk about what other people with an opposing perspective would believe, and why would they believe that. And then finally, you're going to finish your introduction with your position. Tell me the criteria or viewpoints that make up your position, and include the question as part of your thesis. I believe, and then explain what you believe on this particular topic. Then we're going to move into the first citizen. So in our second paragraph, we're going to really explore the position of Citizen 1. The first thing you're going to do is analyze Citizens 1 perspective. Where do they fall on the individualism, collectivism spectrum? So if we refresh our memory on the individualism, collectivism spectrum, we know that all of the sources, generally speaking, will fall into the category of liberalism. We don't typically see sources that fall to the extreme right or the extreme left. This source might be a right-wing individualist, and so you would identify them using any key terms that associate with their perspective. Perhaps they want limited government. Perhaps they're a left-wing collectivist that would like more government control or intervention. Or perhaps there's someone who's more moderate. Is this person more of a classical liberal, a modern liberal, or a democratic socialist? If this is an economic source, perhaps this person is more of an advocate for capitalism, or are they more advocating for a mixed economy? Ultimately, all of the sources will fall under the category of liberalism, but it's your job to identify what is their perspective. So once you've identified their perspective and all the key terms that would associate with their perspective, you need to provide some support. So you're going to examine, why would people agree with this particular source? What are the benefits of their argument? And be sure to explain it. Ultimately, you're talking about the pros of this source. You want to talk about why Citizen 1 could be correct. Please do not agree or disagree with the source. You're simply exploring the issue. Now, of course, there are flaws to all arguments. So you're going to explain to me, why would some people disagree with the position of the source? And could there be any negative consequences? What is the source failing to consider? Be sure to provide examples and evidence to prove why this perspective might be flawed. Does this perspective go too far in supporting too much government control or too much individual freedom? What are the consequences of embracing this perspective? Could this perspective have any negative consequences? It is really important that in this paragraph, you do not include your own viewpoint. This mark is simply based on your understanding of the issue, and you need to show that you have a wide range of perspectives that you can acknowledge. Next, you're going to move on to Citizen 2's perspective in paragraph 3. Again, the first thing you're going to do is consider their perspective and where do they fall on the individualism-collectivism spectrum. You want to identify any key terms that might apply to your source. Especially if this is an economic source, you may want to include economic terms like a mixed economy or capitalism. Once you've identified their perspective, you need to identify why some would agree with the position of the source. And what is their reasoning? What is the benefit of their argument and why? Are there any examples or case studies to prove that their argument is valid? How does Canada compare to the scenario mentioned in the source? Next, you're going to explain why some individuals would disagree with the position of the source and what is their reasoning. Provide examples, evidence, or events to prove why this perspective might be flawed. Does this perspective go too far in supporting too much government control or too much individual freedom? And what are the consequences of embracing this perspective? Could this perspective have any negative consequences? It is absolutely critical at this point you are still not including your own perspective. You're just showing that you have the ability to explore the issue in a variety of perspectives, but you are not putting your own position in yet. Then you're going to move on to Citizen 3 and you're going to repeat the same steps. First, what is their perspective and where do they fall on the individualism-collectivism spectrum? You're going to refer to any key terms or phrases that might add to the perspective of your source. Why would some people support the position of the citizen and what are the benefits of their arguments? Be sure to explain all the pros of this argument. And then you're going to explain why people would disagree with the source. Are they failing to consider any alternate perspectives? Finally, you're going to check in paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 when you're analyzing each of the three citizens that you have not put your own perspective. The words I should never occur in these 3 paragraphs. So what is the marker looking for at this point? After these paragraphs have been written, the marker should be able to evaluate the first criteria, which is exploration and analysis. Through your introduction, and through your analysis of all 3 citizens, we will look at the quality of the exploration of the issue. So have you explored all different opinions on the issue? And have you analyzed various points of view? And how well do you understand the topic? This category is worth 40% of the mark. And in order to get 100% in this category, your exploration needs to be insightful and comprehensive. Your analysis needs to be thoughtful and thorough. And you should have a perceptive understanding of the various points of view. It's really important to note that you can't just copy down the source or even just summarize the source. If you just copy the source, you can't get higher than a 20% in this category. And if you only summarize the source in your own words, you can't score higher than 40% in this category. You must add some type of original thought to each of these paragraphs. Next, you're going to move on to the most important paragraph, which is your opinion. This is a very important paragraph, and unfortunately, some students make the mistake of treating this like a conclusion paragraph, where they only really summarize their opinion in one or two statements. This is not a conclusion. This paragraph is worth as many marks as all of those other 4 paragraphs are combined. So in this paragraph, your job is to convince me to agree with whatever your position is. You're going to describe your perspective. It might align completely with one source or take parts of some sources and combine them into a new, better opinion. How much freedom should we give up for the greater good? And describe each element of your opinion by explaining why, providing examples or evidence that show that you are correct. Are there any points that all 3 sources didn't even consider? Maybe you have an alternative viewpoint. There is always a bonus for originality. You're going to continue on with this paragraph by reflecting on your position and reiterating how much freedom should we give up for the greater good. The your mark is based on how convincing you are in this paragraph, but in order to be convincing, you need to have facts and examples to persuade me. So what is the marker looking for on this paragraph? Well, I'm looking to see how well you defended your position. Do you have a strong quality to your argument? Do you have great evidence? And do you understand social studies and how the way the world works? This aspect of the assignment is worth 40% of your mark. And in order to score 100% in this category, you need to be convincing and logical, specific and accurate, thorough, and have a perceptive understanding of social studies. So to summarize, you have now written 5 paragraphs. You have explored why this is a debatable issue, especially in Canada. In paragraphs 2, 3, and 4, you've explored the pros and cons of each citizen, including what ideologies they fall into. And in your final paragraph, in paragraph 5, this is where you've persuaded me to agree with your position using facts and evidence. Finally, after the entire essay is complete, I can evaluate communication. I'm going to look at organization and coherence, sentence variety and word choice, vocabulary. This specifically refers to social studies vocabulary, sentence construction, and grammar and mechanics. Do you have nice, clean sentences with no mistakes? Of course, the errors that you make are in proportion to how long your assignment is. So if you write a longer assignment and make a few mistakes, that will count less than if you write a short assignment and make a few mistakes. The communication category is worth 20% of the mark. And in order to get 100% on this category, you need to have fluent writing. It needs to be purposefully organized, which is why you want to organize it the way I've instructed. You want to have an engaging voice using strong vocabulary. Your vocabulary is precise and you've used social studies words, and you have confident control of sentence construction and grammar. This means that your sentences are nice and clean with no mistakes. So in order to make your essay look really nice and presentable and professional for the marker, you need a few things. The first one is a title. Now, there's no need to create a unique title because the markers don't typically read the title and focus on it. So simply write assignment 3 at the top of your paper. The next is a professional font. Don't use any fancy script fonts. Just stick to a professional font like Times New Roman, Arial, or Calibri. Now, font size really is important. If it's too small, it's difficult for the reader. And if it's too big, it makes it look like you're reading an elementary book. So you want to keep it at 12 point. It is also important to make it easy on the reader by double spacing it. That being said, in between each paragraph, there shouldn't be any extra spaces. There should be a space in between every line all the way through your paper. You want to make sure all of your paragraphs are indented and that your essay is to the left. You do not want to center your whole essay. And finally, you simply need to put your name in the footer at the bottom of the page. On a diploma exam, you will have all that put in for you, including your ID number. Once you've done all of this and you've checked it over, now all you have to do is turn it in.